home is on the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, and I'm very pleased to be here. At this time, I'll turn it over to Jordan.
Je m'appelle Jordan Cantwell. Je suis la modératrice de l'Église unie du Canada. We're grateful to be on this land, the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and Anishinaabeg peoples, and the Williams Treaties. Today, as we begin an historic consultation on Aboriginal ministries in the United Church, we are also meeting one of our commitments to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In response to Call to Action 48, we are today issuing a statement on how we intend to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the framework for reconciliation. And I'd just like to also welcome those who are joining us online today.
The moderator, together with speakers from the Aboriginal Ministries Council, will read the statement in a few minutes. But first, I would like to give you some background. The first report of the Truth and Reconciliation calls for complete new relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. It calls for this to be lived out at every level of society, including the church. How do we build that relationship? The United Nations Declaration, which has been worked on and written by Indigenous peoples from around the world, provides a way for us to do that. It sheds old colonial ideas and stresses relationships of mutuality, equality, and respect. In November, General Council Executive created a task force to write this statement. And just as importantly, begin a planning process for the church to implement the declaration. The task group includes members from across the church, including the Aboriginal Ministries Council. They have worked hard to bring this statement forward, but this statement is just the beginning of the conversation on how we will implement the declaration. In fact, the task group meets for 2 days following the consultation. Copies of the statement in English are handed out, as we ask that you not read them just yet. Instead, please listen to the statement as it is being read in the original languages of Turtle Island, together with English and French. At this time, I would ask the speakers to come forward, and I would ask the drum group to do an honor song before the statement is read.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the drum group for that song. On June 2nd, 2015, the United Church of Canada, along with the other church parties to the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement, welcomed the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. These calls include the adoption of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the framework for reconciliation. Call to action number 48 specifically calls on the churches to do this work and to report by March 31st, 2016. Le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Ban Ki-moon, a déjà dit de la déclaration qu'elle offre aux États et aux populations autochtones une occasion capitale de renforcer leurs relations, de promouvoir la réconciliation et d'éviter que les problèmes du passé ne réapparaissent. Les commissionnaires de la CVR offrent ainsi aux Églises cette même occasion capitale, qui pour nous constitue un moyen concret et transformer une relation coloniale d'exclusion en une relation fondée sur la réciprocité, l'équité et le respect.
Why, Saturn, Samaktal, United Church of Canada, where is some algech, and is to them Jurten call to action, number 48, them till them goat it. Call to action. Met Jochem stiet. Dem Jochem dit la algechet. Mulla dag. A joch. Dem sa wit goed laat. Called United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. Nou nep sa wit zo'n. In the the United Church sat on. We did some sa. Some Wilp, United Church of Canada. No, Aboriginal Ministries Council. Consultation, United Church of Canada. Dem Saddam no met de haag algech spijt no. Dem run saak dem de bulazep consultation so waddel dem siwa. Dus algech ton dem bakchum met de haagt dem gungeat dat spijt no listed le algechem spijt no so wit goimach in de ton goimach dem haim dus la gonna na dat lautem al go get and I'm see why the United Church of Canada.
The United Church has been on a journey towards reconciliation for more than 30 years. In 1986, the Settler Church responded to the long-standing call of Indigenous peoples to apologize for its role in colonization and the destruction of their cultures and spiritual practices. This apology was acknowledged by the Indigenous Church 2 years ago with the expressed hope that the Church would live out the apology in action and sincerity. We have adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as a commitment to honoring that expectation of Indigenous peoples in the United Church.
We understand the principles, norms, and standards of the Declaration to be reflected in the right to self-determination, the right to cultural and spiritual identity, the right to participate in decision-making, the right to lands and resources, the right to free, prior, and informed consent, the right to be free from discrimination.
Indigenous peoples are self-determining and engaged in the Church's decision-making processes. One key structure for this is the Aboriginal Ministries Council and its constituent parts. But we also understand that our practices for many years resulted in the exclusion of Indigenous peoples from visioning, leadership, and decision-making. The United Church recognizes Indigenous peoples' right to their own cultural and spiritual practices, and acknowledges how, as an institution, it continues to be enriched by Indigenous wisdom and ways of knowing. But it would be misleading to say that these principles are fully understood and lived out in the Church, or that Indigenous peoples in Canada are free from discrimination.
The United Church has a tradition of advocating for Indigenous justice on issues such as land and treaty rights, clean water, murdered and missing Indigenous women, and equitable funding for social welfare, education, and health care. Yet the Church still struggles to understand how important the resolution of these issues will be in achieving true reconciliation.
These gaps between intention and results demonstrate that there are still much for us to do as we seek to make the apology tangible and real. Adopting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a framework for reconciliation sets us a new standard for that journey. It requires us to review all aspects of our life as a church, from how we worship and build community to our human resources and finance policies to how we practice advocacy. It requires us to revisit our identity as a church and how that identity does or does not foster relationships of mutuality, equality, and respect, both within and beyond the walls of the church.
Täytyistä muuta manuma. In tiistäällä. Niin tuin. Me oma tiisi päivä United Church. Kai jos ehtää tuma. Task force on muutti. Vitsi hitut sekani kamaan myytik. Piskihtas kaaniota sitten niok. Se vitsi kaattiik on muutti. Kojas siihtoin. Ainakin kajattiutas kieltä sitten niok. Ja vuodas ilman myynikaan tii. Ainakin vitsi hivitsik. Joku tohtia niin mä ainakin. Kajattiutas kieltä sitten niok. Jiskwa. Kajattiutas kieltä sitten niok. Ei mihinkään. Minun maut siittyy. Me kaudas sivutas tiik. Minin sikapää piskihtä penään niok. Joku tohtoma. Kihti maut siittyy niin. Ja mä kai suutas taniik. Että vitsi kaattii kun mä. Tai tutsi kai suutas taniik. Joku tohti tuutas taniik. Hän mihin on tohti iskin omaa maasut ja kossimi. Ja muutsi. Mä vintuin kaudas taniik. Uutsi. Kakojaskua kajattiutas kieltä sit niok. Minä kaitas tigi. Ja niin kaisi outas tigitsek. Minä kaisi outas taatsi. Minä kaisi piskitas taatsik. Iskossa ei outas taniok. Hän mihin me kakasi kaisi. Kojaskua kikiani mä vitsi ittuin kahkidou. Ittahan me kahkidou niihin. Kaapaapiskihtas tiippin mätsiin. Vitsikää taas usehtaani. Mä lastikin. Ja kun tohtani kituudas taatsik. Se tutsikaattik. Takistas taniok. Umma. Kaudas taniok. Mä ulostamaakin. Here was the no swim in a nutshell.
We acknowledge that this work will be neither quick nor easy. The settler church is beginning to absorb the shock of its complexity in creating the inequities facing Indigenous people. The Indigenous church is also facing the challenge of decolonization. The 1986 apology shifted us as a denomination. It impacted our identity in ways that we cannot understand at this time, that we did not understand at the time. Adopting the United Nations Declaration as a framework for reconciliation begins us to a similar moment now.
Egoanas genamak, konehtaga tehenang, minak mamat nensganang. Ego andras yak, wek dewagenda monam. We ma mikana wet kaginen kwek wet mamot ek. Kakuna wonan mandonan kaunchimikak. We kaukuna koyak. Win ons awek dogmatium namons. Ego we kakimina kwakwe meokmaun. We emeokamau ego ege mamon koyak. We awe kadobmatium nam. Mando ege mamon koyak. Ma ege mamon angwe ake. Win ons ego we ege te bogan we Quindama ko nam Jimamo na koyak. Mwe 2 Corinthians Nyanan ena neuzap mena sangasizap.
We are not sure what lies ahead as we complete this turn towards justice and deepen our commitment to a new identity, a new relationship, and a new way of being, both in the church and in the world. De nouvelles relations pointent à l'horizon et nous nous tournons résolument vers elles.
At this time, there'll be copies of the declaration handed out, and while they're doing that, we're going to sing a couple songs. I guess the first one is "Let Us Build a House Where Love Can Dwell."